The wedding invitation arrived like a polite slap in the face, delivered in a sleek white envelope gold trim, and my name typed like I wasn't family, but a business contact. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have. Clara stood behind me drying her hands and said, "Noah, you okay?" I nodded, lying with a smile. What I didn't tell her then was that it wasn't the invitation that bothered me. It was the signature at the bottom. Ethan Weston, my cousin, my business partner, my former best friend, and now apparently the man who was about to marry into wealth I didn't know he had. The man who'd suddenly stopped replying to my messages 2 months ago. The man who I'd later realized never planned to include me in the celebration, only the show. I didn't expect that weekend to change everything, my job, my family, my entire place in the world, but it did, and not in the way you'd think. If you've ever been blindsided by the people you trusted most, or if you've had to quietly swallow betrayal with a smile in front of strangers, you're going to want to hear this. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Make sure you hit subscribe for more stories, where the underdog doesn't just survive, they learn how to burn quietly. And hey, comment below what state or country you're watching from. I want to know where our strongest listeners are coming from. Now back to the story. My name is Noah Benson. I'm 34 years old, a former Army medic, now co-founder of a regional logistics startup based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We move things fast and quietly, kind of like how Ethan moved behind my back. He and I built the company from the ground up over 5 years. Long nights in warehouses learning routes, fixing driver shortages by working double shifts ourselves. We never needed outside money because we ran lean and moved smart. Or so I thought. The moment things got big, real contracts, national exposure, Ethan changed. He started wearing watches with more diamonds than I could count and talking like a TED speaker. Still, I didn't question it. I stayed in the back end, handling the systems and expansion logistics. I was always the quiet one, the one they underestimated. But Ethan liked being the face of it all. He loved the spotlight, and apparently he was willing to do anything to keep it. The wedding was at this upscale vineyard just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. Clara and I drove 5 hours, me in an old blazer, her in a navy dress she'd worn to my brother's graduation. We joked about not fitting in. She noticed that our names were printed on a smaller card, unlike the main guests. "Why are we listed under supporting partners?" she whispered. I laughed it off, but something about the way the host smiled at Ethan and completely ignored me when we arrived made her grip my arm tighter than usual. The vineyard sparkled. Live cello music played in the background. Everyone seemed to be part of a world we didn't belong to. I chalked it up to nerves, but Clara didn't. And by the time Ethan raised his glass in a toast that wasn't about love or marriage, but about legacy, about cleansing old structures and embracing new leadership, I felt her hand stiffen in mine. She leaned in, lips barely touching my ear, and whispered, "Noah, we have to leave. Now. Noah, we have to leave. Now." Her voice wasn't urgent. It was final. The kind of tone that doesn't ask for discussion, just movement. I blinked, still half smiling at the guests clapping around us. Ethan had just finished his speech. Everyone was standing, applauding. Some even whistled. A toast that felt more like a eulogy for something I hadn't realized was dying. I turned toward Clara, brows knitted. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Just slipped her hand from mine, grabbed her clutch, and started weaving through the crowd. And for the first time that day, I stopped pretending I was comfortable. I followed her out of the courtyard, past the fairy lights down the cobblestone path where our rental car was parked beside a valet station lined with black Escalades and luxury sedans. I didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes of the drive. She stared ahead, fingers tapping against her thigh like she was holding back something boiling. "Clara," I finally said, voice low, Can you just tell me what's going on?" She turned to me, lips slightly parted, and said, "You didn't see what they handed out during the toast?" I shook my head. She pulled a folded pamphlet from her clutch and handed it over. I unfolded it at the next red light. It was printed like a glossy mini-program Western Legacy Foundation announcement. I scanned it. Ethan's face in a gold frame. A new logistics partnership launching under his name. My name, nowhere. No mention of co-founder. No credit for anything. But worse, near the bottom in fine print, leadership transition to occur by end of Q3. Board recommends Ethan Weston as the sole managing partner in accordance with revised corporate governance protocols. I stared at the words. My pulse kicked. This doesn't make sense. He can't just... He already did. Clara cut in calm but furious. You were never invited to this wedding to celebrate. You were brought here to witness your own replacement. We drove in silence for a long stretch after that. The road was dark, trees pressed in on both sides, and I remember thinking it felt like we were moving through a tunnel with no exit. That silence felt louder than anything. Clara eventually broke it. "Do you remember that meeting 3 months ago when Ethan asked you to sign the updated compliance documents?" I nodded slowly. I didn't think much of it. Just routine restructuring stuff. "He got you to approve a clause revision without legal review," she said, biting her lip. "It allowed for an automatic succession plan if you were ever deemed in conflict with company interest." I stared at her throat dry. "Conflict of interest, I've done nothing." "Exactly," she said. "Which is why they're going to invent one." Her voice cracked on that last word. "And the worst part, I think your own uncle co-signed it." I saw him smile during Ethan's speech like it was a done deal. My stomach dropped. Her words rolled over me like fog, suffocating but not yet fully real. My Uncle Sam had been more like a father to me growing up. My own dad wasn't around much after I turned 10, and Sam always made sure I had a job during summers, helped fund my first car. Even gave me my first loan when Ethan and I started the business. And now he was part of this. That night, back in our modest apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed in my tux pants and white undershirt, staring at the black tie crumpled on the floor. I replayed the toast in my mind over and over. Ethan's smug little pauses, the way the crowd laughed at the part about old roles being repurposed, the way our senior logistics manager raised a glass and clapped me on the back like I should be honored to be erased so gracefully. What cut deepest wasn't the betrayal, it was the performance. The way it had all been staged like a farewell concert I never agreed to headline. Clara came in, quietly sat next to me, and laid her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You didn't deserve that." I didn't answer. Because she was right, I didn't. But I also realized something in that moment, something bitter and bright. No one was coming to save me. Not a lawyer, not the board, not even my family. If I wanted to survive this, if I wanted to win, I'd have to get smart. Fast. The next morning, I woke up early, not out of habit, but out of raw adrenaline. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys, then clicked into our internal admin dashboard. I still had access. That meant he hadn't moved fast enough. Yet. Clara walked in with coffee, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're not going down without a fight, are you?" I looked at her eyes burning and said, "No, I'm not." That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was awake. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is eventually people stop watching. That's where the real advantage begins. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I showed up to the office when expected, nodded at everyone like I didn't know they were already prepping my exit. I even congratulated Ethan in front of our regional team during Monday's check-in. He smiled that corporate smile all teeth and practiced humility. Said something about new chapters and collaborative horizons, and I swear to you, I almost believed he believed his own lie. But behind the scenes, I was building something they didn't see coming. Every night after Clara went to bed, I stayed up combing through shared folders, internal audit trails, metadata from system logins. I wasn't a tech guy, but I wasn't stupid either. And 5 years of co-running a lean company taught me how to read between the lines. At first it looked clean, but then I found it. One file buried deep in a hidden directory labeled Finance QTR or Shadow, inside a string of emails between Ethan and a man named Derek Hess, a consultant for a private equity firm based out of Boston. Hess had been advising Ethan on how to rebrand the company's mission post-removal of the co-founder, and even listed out talking points about my supposed emotional instability stemming from military PTSD. That line made my hands shake, because I served. And I had bad nights. But weaponizing that against me, that wasn't just betrayal. That was cowardice in its purest form. I needed help. Real help. Someone who could make sure I wasn't hallucinating a conspiracy. So I called Morgan Ridge, Clara's former law school roommate, now a cybersecurity specialist working out of DC. I remembered her mostly as the friend who always wore combat boots with her suits and had zero tolerance for fake people. Clara texted her, and within the hour, Morgan was on a video call with me, black-rimmed glasses on sipping iced coffee like it was fuel. Noah sent me everything she said bluntly. I've seen corporate takedowns before, but this is surgical. I shared the files. Within 24 hours, she called me back. They've already initiated the shell structure, she said. 2 holding companies. One under Western Strategic Trust, the other under an offshore entity in the Caymans. The goal: push you out by Q3, bury you in HR red tape, and make it look like you stepped down voluntarily to protect your reputation. Classic bait and erase. I sat there staring at the screen. So what do? I asked. Morgan leaned in, voice sharp. You do exactly what they think you won't. You stay calm, stay in position, and document everything. Let them think they've won the game while you build the evidence to flip the board. Over the next 2 weeks, that's exactly what I did. I walked into every meeting with a silent recorder in my pocket. I noted every strange financial reroute. I tracked login activity, flagged discrepancies, and slowly built a folder so damning it could bury not just Ethan, but anyone who signed off on his schemes. Clara worked beside me, coordinating files, cleaning up my notes, making timelines. She said nothing most days, just stayed in that focused, fierce mode I had only seen once before the night she defended a wrongly accused client until 4 a.m. with no sleep and still beat a 5-man legal team. That woman was my anchor, and the only reason I didn't throw a chair through a window when I learned what came next. Because it wasn't just Ethan. It wasn't just my uncle. It was 4 senior executives, including our director of compliance, who had co-signed a motion stating I was emotionally unfit to represent company interests in investor relations. And that motion, it was being prepared to submit at the next board meeting. The kicker, I had been intentionally left off the calendar invite. If Morgan hadn't hacked the back-end shared calendar platform, I never would have known it existed. That's when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a damn coup. But I wasn't angry anymore. That phase had passed. What I felt now was precision, cold, clean focus. Like I was back in the field again, no emotion, just execution. One night, while Clara was making tea, she looked over and asked quietly, "What would happen if you just let it go?" I turned toward her, genuinely confused. "You mean, walk away?" She nodded. "You'd still have your name, your skills. We could start fresh." I sat with that for a long time, staring at the steam curling from her cup, the faint glow from the desk lamp warming her face. And then I said, because they didn't just try to take my company, they tried to rewrite me. They tried to delete the version of me that worked weekends, skipped holidays, missed sleep and birthdays and anniversaries to keep this thing alive. They want to turn me into a footnote. I can't walk away from that. Not yet. She smiled softly. Good, because I wasn't going to let you anyway. By the end of week 3, Morgan sent me a text that read, "Got something. Big." When we jumped on the next call, she shared her screen. What she'd found was devastating. An unreleased internal memo authored by Ethan and stamped confidential. It outlined plans to leak a fabricated harassment complaint against me to justify my removal in the press. It was scheduled to go out in 3 days to a media contact listed as discreet plus loyal. Clara looked at me and said, "They're going to kill your name before the board meeting even happens." That's when I knew it was time to strike back, but not with noise, with proof, with people, with power they couldn't see coming. The hardest part of planning a counterstrike is pretending you're still losing. The next morning, I walked into the office, same as always, buttoned-up shirt, quiet nods, calm face. But inside, I was counting down the minutes. 3 days until the leak. 6 days until the board meeting. 1 shot to prove I wasn't the man they were trying to erase. But if I thought things were tense before I hadn't seen anything yet, the pressure didn't build, it detonated. It started with a company-wide memo from Ethan praising upcoming structural changes, thanking me for years of dedication, and subtly hinting that I would be stepping back to focus on personal well-being. No one had spoken to me about it. No one asked for my statement. I just stood there in the hallway rereading it on my phone, while people walked past offering sympathetic smiles, awkward shoulder taps, and the occasional, "Hey man, let me know if you need anything." That was the first time I felt it. Not just the betrayal, but the displacement, the slow rot of being sidelined while still standing in the middle of your own legacy. Clara met me in the lobby at lunch. "You okay?" she asked. I shrugged. "They're already burying the body. I'm just here to watch the funeral." She didn't laugh, just grabbed my hand, held it tightly and said, "Not if we burn their coffin first." That night, Morgan sent us a batch of recovered email threads and flagged attachments, proof that Ethan had been actively doctoring invoices to inflate operating costs, then diverting the margins to an unregistered consulting shell under his fiancée's maiden name. Her name was new to me, Bria Lattimore. She hadn't been part of this story before, but suddenly she was everywhere. Legal consultant, strategic advisor, real estate handler, quiet recipient of over 800,000 in consulting fees in less than 10 months. When Clara Googled her name, she found a blurry photo in a glossy engagement announcement posted by Ethan's mother. They were engaged, secretly. Not just business partners, partners in every way. That changed everything. Bria wasn't just some hidden asset. She was the one pulling the strings behind Ethan's ego. She was the strategist. And it wasn't long before she noticed us moving. The next day, Morgan's personal server was attacked. Someone launched a DDoS wave, burying her under false logins and spammed IPs. Then her LinkedIn was flooded with fake harassment claims. Then Clara got a letter. A cease and desist from a law firm in Chicago claiming she was violating a non-disclosure clause by accessing proprietary corporate data. Only problem, Clara never signed any NDA. That's when we knew Bria had activated their defense plan, and it was ruthless. I got a call from my mother that night. She sounded hesitant, like someone had told her a version of events she wasn't sure how to process. "Noah," she started slowly, I heard you're stepping down, that you're getting help." My breath caught. Getting help. I repeated. What are you talking about? Your Uncle Sam called, she said. He said you're dealing with... She paused. A breakdown. That you needed space. That everyone's just trying to help you transition out with dignity. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I said nothing. Just hung up. Clara found me sitting on the floor 20 minutes later, back against the kitchen cabinets, fists clenched so tight my knuckles had gone white. They called my mum, I said quietly. They planted it with my own family. Clara sat down beside me. They want you to lose control. That's how they win. Make you look unstable, then everything you say sounds like paranoia. I nodded slowly. Then I won't say anything. Not yet. But when I do, there won't be any doubt. The next 2 days were war. Morgan worked remotely from a safe server after rerouting all her backups to an encrypted cloud. Clara and I met with Gina Torres, a corporate crisis strategist Morgan trusted. Gina used to handle PR fallout for Fortune 500 companies. She knew how to tip a narrative without ever making it look personal. Together, we devised a 72-hour timeline. Release a public but subtle investor memo. Leak just enough of the altered invoices to a journalist Gina knew. Prepare a press draft from my end that sounded like concerned clarity, not revenge. People don't like vendettas, Gina told me. But they respect integrity. Speak like a man with facts, not feelings. I took her advice to heart. But it wasn't easy, because while we built our case, Ethan escalated. He changed the locks to our shared data room, froze access to 2 of my internal email accounts, and worst of all, he sent out a mental health awareness post on LinkedIn that didn't name me, but was clearly about me. It praised leaders who know when to take time for themselves, and those brave enough to step back before harming team cohesion. That post got nearly 2,000 likes. I read it 5 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. It wasn't just gaslighting. It was character assassination in real time, and people were eating it up. That night, I stood outside our apartment balcony, watching the rain streak down, like gravity was pulling everything down faster than I could hold it together. Clara walked out, held out a cup of cocoa, and said, "You know what? You haven't done through all this." I looked at her blank. What asked for help? I smiled faintly. "You've already done more than anyone ever has." She shook her head. "I mean, help from the right people. People who have power. People who owe you favors." I stared at her. Like who? She paused, then reached for her phone. "Let's call John Callahan." My eyebrows shot up. "Your old boss." "The same. He owes me 2. One of them's about to be you." What Clara didn't know, what none of us knew at the time, was that John Callahan wasn't just some former corporate mentor. He was now head of compliance for a federal oversight task force on corporate governance. And when he saw what I'd uncovered, everything changed. John Callahan didn't say much on the first call. He asked for the documents. He asked for timestamps. Then he asked if I could be in DC in person the following morning. "Bring a hard drive," he said, "and don't email anything else." That night, I didn't sleep. Clara packed the drive with everything: audits, emails, screenshots, recordings, call logs, the hidden financial transfers, the engagement announcement, even Bria's shell company incorporation documents. Morgan encrypted it twice. I left at 5 a.m., in a hoodie and cap, like I was sneaking out of my own life. When I walked into that glass tower just outside Capitol Hill, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a witness. And that's exactly how John treated me. "You're not crazy," he said, thumbing through the folder. "You're not unstable. You're a whistleblower. And this," he held up one of Bria's fake invoices, "is a felony." I sat across from him, exhausted but grounded. He closed the file and looked me in the eye. "You understand what happens next?" I nodded. "I don't want to ruin them," I said, "but I'm not letting them ruin me." He smiled. "Then let's do this clean." 2 days later, we executed the plan. Step 1. Gina released a soft press statement titled "False Transitions," when internal power grabs are dressed as mental health leaves, anonymously sourced, but with enough detail to stir questions. Within hours, 2 business news outlets picked it up. Step 2. Morgan triggered a digital packet to a small group of our investors, including side-by-side invoices showing Ethan's manipulation. Clara hand-delivered a physical letter to our general counsel. It read simply, "This is not a resignation. This is a reckoning. Full evidence enclosed. Noah Benson." And step 3. We scheduled an emergency board meeting, a real one that included everyone including Bria, who was now listed as special external advisor to the company. That was the trap. 9:00 a.m. sharp, executive boardroom, clear glass walls, 17 people around the table. Ethan sat at the head, in a grey suit, white pocket square, smug as ever. Bria sat beside him in a sharp navy blazer, flipping through a binder like she was preparing for a debate she expected to win. I walked in last. No suit, just jeans a button down and a black folder. Ethan gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Noah. Wasn't sure you'd show up today. You've been off the radar." I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I just pulled out the folder and placed it at the center of the table. Then I took a flash drive from my pocket and plugged it into the HDMI port at the front of the room. The screen behind me lit up. "I'll keep this brief," I said. "What you're about to see includes evidence of financial misrepresentation, unauthorized contract alterations, misuse of investor funds, and falsified mental health records submitted to justify my removal." I clicked play. First, a screen-recorded scroll through the metadata on altered invoices. Next, a split screen of emails from Ethan to Bria discussing fabricated reports. Then came the kicker, a recorded call dated from the night of the wedding, where Bria told an unknown third party. "Once he's out, Ethan takes full control. The PTSD rumor will hold if we feed it slow. Make it look like a breakdown. We'll have the board behind us by next quarter." Silence, not a breath in the room. I turned. Ethan was pale. Bria had frozen mid-page. Then came the final slide, a letter signed by John Callahan on behalf of the Federal Task Force on Corporate Ethics, indicating that an official inquiry had been opened. The bottom included a subpoena for both Ethan Weston and Bria Lattimore. Bria was the first to speak. "This is fabricated." Her voice trembled slightly. I raised my eyebrows. "Then sue me." Gina, who had joined, virtually cut in with a calm voice. "Actually, we'd welcome discovery. Should make the investigation easier." Ethan stood arms crossed. "This is revenge. That's all this is." I stepped forward close enough to look him directly in the eye. "No, Ethan. This is exposure. And you did it to yourself." One of the board members, Carlos Grant, a man who had worked with us since the garage days, cleared his throat. "I move to place Ethan Weston and Bria Lattimore on immediate suspension pending legal review." Another voice followed, seconded. A third, all in favor. Hands rose one by one. 12. 4 abstained. 1 opposed Uncle Sam. But it didn't matter. Majority ruled. Ethan didn't say a word. Bria stood slowly, her face tight. The security team waiting outside the door stepped forward. Not because we wanted drama, but because Gina anticipated they'd try to leave with company property. I watched as they were escorted out 2 people who had orchestrated an entire scheme behind polished smiles and crisp suits, now reduced to silence. I sat down at the head of the table. Not because I wanted power, but because I had earned the truth. "Let's begin," I said. And for the first time in weeks, maybe even months, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. The fallout began within 48 hours. Bria's law license was flagged for immediate review. A formal ethics complaint was filed by John Callahan's office, citing unauthorized legal counsel and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. Ethan tried to go quiet. No LinkedIn posts, no statements, but silence speaks volumes when the headlines start writing themselves. Logistics, startup co-founder ousted after whistleblower reveals $800K consultant scam. Veteran exec targets mental health for power grab backfires. The narrative was out of his hands, and for once, it was in mine. Still, the days that followed weren't glamorous. They were heavy. There's no joy in watching people you once loved become pariahs, not even when they deserve it. The board issued a public apology in my name and voted to re-establish the executive structure, this time with full oversight. They offered me full operational control. CEO. Absolute decision-making power. But I turned it down. Instead, I nominated Carlos Grant, the same man who spoke up during the meeting, the one who once helped me load pallets at 2 a.m. before our first investor pitch. "I'm not interested in control," I told the board. "I'm interested in integrity." That's what the company had been missing. Not brilliance, not ideas, just people who remembered where it all started. Carlos accepted, and the first thing he did was reopen the company's mentorship program for veterans and underrepresented founders. Clara, meanwhile, was offered a consulting position in the company's ethics division. She declined too. "I'd rather write the policies than enforce someone else's," she said with a smirk. But she did accept something else, a letter, handwritten, from the firm that once represented Bria. It read simply, "We're sorry. We chose the wrong side." That letter now sits framed on the bookshelf next to her law degree. I visited my Uncle Sam 2 days after the board vote, drove out to his house. He opened the door and looked older than I remembered. Thinner. Worn out. "Why are you here?" he asked. I pulled out a plain manila envelope and handed it to him. "That's everything you didn't want to believe, in case you still need proof." He looked down at it but didn't take it. "I thought Ethan was doing what was best for the company." "No," I said. "You thought he was doing what was best for your legacy. But legacies built on silence don't last." I didn't stay long. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask for an apology. Some wounds don't need stitches, they just need to be left behind. That night, Clara and I went for a walk. No talking. Just breathing. It felt like I'd been underwater for months and finally came up for air. The stars were out, clear and sharp. We sat on a park bench, and I remember her saying, "You didn't just survive that, Noah. You unburied yourself." I looked at her and smiled. "We unburied me." She squeezed my hand. "Then maybe now you can live again." In the following weeks, the company rebranded not in name, but in culture. Town halls became transparent. Feedback loops opened. Every employee received a personal check-in, not just from HR, but from leadership. Carlos even started a rotating coffee meetup where no titles were allowed, just people talking. I stopped attending after the third one, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to be the center anymore. I'd done what I came to do, and when people asked if I regretted not pressing charges, not taking Ethan to court, not dragging Bria through more legal pain, I just told them the truth. Winning isn't about punishment. It's about reclaiming your name and knowing when to walk away with it intact. 6 months later, I stood barefoot on the back deck of a lake house I never thought I'd own. The air smelled like pine and possibility, and Clara was inside making pancakes, while the dog we rescued 2 weeks ago, Scout, chased his own tail across the gravel path. My phone was off. No meetings, no emails, no ghost alerts from some board calendar I'd been locked out of. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally heard it peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from choosing not to keep fighting. It didn't happen all at once. I still had moments when I opened old files and felt my jaw tighten. Still had dreams where Ethan stood at the head of that table and smiled like none of it had happened. But then I'd wake up, roll over, and feel Clara's hand in mine, steady and warm. And I'd remember the story didn't end at betrayal. It ended at rebuilding. A month after stepping away from the company, I launched a mentorship program of my own, something simple local. I called it Start Over Strong. It's for veterans like me, for people who've been counted out, for those who've had their character questioned in rooms they weren't allowed to enter. Every week, I meet with a small group. We drink coffee, talk business, sometimes just sit in silence. It's not therapy, it's reality. And sometimes reality is enough. One of the guys in the program, Marcus, a Marine with a background in logistics, once said, "You can't fight fire with fire when they're holding the match and the gasoline. Sometimes you just gotta let them burn their own house down while you build yours quietly across the street." That line stuck with me. Maybe that's what I did. Maybe I didn't win in the way some people expect. No courtroom victory, no screaming match, no press conference. Just a quiet, strategic dismantling. The kind that leaves no smoke, but plenty of ruins for the guilty to wander through. Clara joined me on the deck with 2 mugs. She sat beside me, curled her legs under a blanket, and stared out at the lake. "You know," she said, "you could have destroyed them completely." I nodded. "I know." "But you didn't." I looked at her and smiled, because destruction would have made me part of their game. I wanted to end it, not become it. She rested her head on my shoulder. "That's why you won." And maybe she was right. Not because I had more money or headlines, but because I had my dignity. I had my truth. And I still had her. The only person who never once doubted my worth, even when I started to. Later that day, as we were folding laundry and joking about how many socks we keep losing, she turned and handed me a small white box. Inside a tiny plastic wand with 2 faint pink lines. I stared at it for a second, then looked up at her eyes wide. "We're..." She nodded. "Yeah, we are." I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, stunned and still. And then I laughed, because after everything, this was the twist I never saw coming. Not revenge, not rebuilding, but new life. Clara placed the box on the dresser, took my hand and said, "Now we build something for us." So here's what I've learned. If you've stayed with me this long, sometimes the people you trust the most will turn out to be the architects of your downfall. But that doesn't mean you have to become the wreckage. You can rise without shouting, win without gloating, and rebuild with people who don't just believe in your strength, they remind you of it. Because real peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from knowing who you are when the war is over. And if you've ever been through something like this, family betrayal, false narratives, having to prove your worth to people who should have never questioned it, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories where the quiet one turns out to be the storm. Because sometimes justice wears sneakers, holds hands, and makes pancakes on a Saturday morning. Stay strong, stay smart, and most of all, stay you.